The banging on my garage door was so loud and sudden, it made my coffee tremble in my hand. I set the mug down and headed toward the noise, already knowing who it had to be. Through the side window, I spotted Patricia Dalton, president of the HOA, shouting with her face flushed and her arms flailing. She was yelling something about a stolen vehicle. Right behind her stood her teenage son, Tyler, arms crossed, wearing that smug look I've become very familiar with over the past few weeks. "Open this garage right now," she shouted, her voice cutting to the metal like a siren. "I know you're hiding stolen property in there. The police are already on their way." I couldn't help but smile at that. If only she knew. Without hurrying, I clipped my badge to my belt and walked to the front door instead. When I opened it, she froze. That moment, her confused expression when she saw me standing there calm and collected, almost made all of this worth it. But let me rewind a bit and explain how we even got to this point. 3 weeks ago, I moved into Riverside Heights after getting promoted to chief of police. After 2 decades in apartments, I finally bought a house of my own. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet, 3-bedroom place with a 2-car garage. Perfect for me, and for the car I'd spent 5 years restoring with my late father, a 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429, painted in grabber blue. That car wasn't just metal and horsepower. It was the last project my dad and I worked on before cancer took him. Every time I take out for a drive, I feel connected to him again. Since moving in, I'd driven it 3 times, each time drawing admiration from most of the neighbors. Most, but not all. Patricia Dalton lives a few houses down with her 17-year-old son, Tyler. From the moment I moved in, she made it clear she saw herself as the unofficial queen of the neighborhood. The first time I met her, she handed me a thick binder labeled HOA Guidelines and Expectations and pointed out that my moving truck had apparently exceeded the parking time limit by 2 whole minutes. "We run a tight ship here in Riverside Heights," she said, not a strand of her bleached hair out of place despite the sweltering heat. "I trust you'll follow the rules like everyone else." I nodded, took the binder, and said nothing about my job. I prefer to keep work and personal life separate. No need for people to treat me differently because of my title. The issues started during the 2nd week. I was in the garage polishing the Mustang when Tyler wandered up the driveway like he owned it. His designer sneakers squeaked on the pavement as he walked straight up to the car. "Nice car," he said, running his hand along the fender without asking. "69 Boss 429, I replied, gently moving his hand away. "Just wax that." He looked impressed, and then too interested. I recognize that look, the kind that says, "I want this, and I usually get what I want. You should let me take it for a drive," he said confidently. "I just got my license last month." I almost laughed. A 17-year-old with a brand new license. Behind the wheel of a car like this? Not a chance. "Sorry, kid. This car doesn't leave the garage unless I'm behind the wheel." His face shifted. He wasn't used to hearing no. "My dad pays a lot in HOA fees," he said, puffing himself up. "Like, a lot. That basically makes him part owner of this street. So, technically, I own part of what's on it." I just stared at him for a second, wondering if he really believed that logic. That's not how property ownership works. I said plainly, "We'll see," he muttered before turning and walking off. About 20 minutes after Tyler stormed off, there was a sharp knock at my front door. Patricia had clearly taken time to prepare. She'd swapped into what looked like her version of formal armor. Crisp white pants, a navy blazer pin with her HOA badge, and heels that clicked sharply on my porch tiles. "Mr. Morrison," she started, skipping any kind of greeting. "My son tells me you were rather rude to him earlier. I told him he couldn't drive my car." I said simply, "If that's what you mean." Her mouth tightened into a thin, straight line. Tyler is a very responsible young man. When he expresses interest in something, it's generally considered neighborly to be accommodating. We are a community, after all. "With all due respect, ma'am, that car is a restored classic worth more than most people make in a year. I don't let anyone drive it." She gave a dismissive sniff. "We'll just have to see if that vehicle even complies with HOA regulations. I'll be reviewing the bylaws tonight." And she wasn't bluffing. Over the next week, I began receiving a string of increasingly absurd violation notices. One claimed the car was too loud, even though I hadn't so much as started the engine while she was around. Another stated the color, grabber blue, was too bright and may cause visual distraction for drivers. My personal favorite labeled the Mustang a commercial vehicle, citing that it could be used for racing purposes. I responded to each notice formally and respectfully, referencing specific sections of the HOA guidelines to show her accusations had no merit. That only seemed to fuel her frustration. The situation took another turn the following Saturday. I was outside mowing my lawn when Tyler returned, this time flanked by two of his friends. "Hey, Mr. Morrison," Tyler called out, voice unusually cheerful. Me and the guys were wondering if you'd change your mind. Maybe just a quick ride around the block. I paused and looked up. The answer is still no, Tyler. One of the friends, a stocky teen wearing a football jersey, took a step forward. "Come on, man," he said. "Don't be such a hard ass. What's the harm?" I stopped the mower and stood straight, letting my voice take on the calm authority that comes with 20 years in law enforcement. "You boys need to head home now." That's the end of this conversation. They left, but not before Tyler shot me a look that clearly said this wasn't over. Sure enough, about an hour later, Patricia was back, this time with her husband, Richard. He stood silently behind her, looking like he'd much rather be anywhere else. "You threatened my son and his friends," she yelled. "Richard, the lawyer. We could sue you for emotional distress." Richard shifted uncomfortably at that, his expression tight. I had looked him up after our first run-in. He was a tax attorney, not exactly a courtroom regular. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "I asked him to leave my property. I have every right to do that." "We'll see what the HOA board thinks," she snapped, turning sharply and marching off. Richard offered me an apologetic shrug before following behind. Apparently, the next HOA meeting was something of a spectacle. I didn't attend, but my neighbor Janet gave me the full recap later. Patricia spent 40 minutes talking about how the neighborhood had taken a turn since she moved in, Janet said with a chuckle. She even had a PowerPoint presentation about the dangers of street racing culture. She used the word hooligan. Can you believe that? Janet grinned, said your car was attracting the wrong kind of attention. I told her the only people harassing you were her and Tyler. She didn't take that well. The harassment kept coming. I'd find notes tucked under my windshield wiper. My trash bins would mysteriously get knocked over on collection day. Someone even filed a complaint with the city about my grass being half an inch too long. And then came the day it all blew up. It was a Saturday morning, and I was finally enjoying. I was sipping coffee in my kitchen when I heard voices outside. I glanced through the window and saw Tyler and his friends again, this time standing in the driveway, snapping selfies through the garage window, clearly trying to feature my car in the background. I stepped outside. "Tyler, that's enough. You need to leave." "It's just pictures, bro," he said with a smirk. "For Instagram. My followers love sick rides." "Off my property," I said firmly. "I won't ask again." His face flushed with anger. "You know what? Screw you. That car should be mine anyway. You're too old to appreciate something like that. Probably can't even drive it right." "Tyler," I said, my voice shifting into the tone my officers knew as my chief voice. "Leave now or I'll call the police." He gave a short laugh. "Too late. My mom already did. She said you stole that car. Looked it up. The registration doesn't even have your name on it." I exhaled, irritated but not surprised. Patricia must have checked the DMV records. She wasn't wrong. The car was still under my father's name. He passed away 6 months ago, and while I had inherited the car, I hadn't gotten around to transferring the title yet. Life had been busy. "Yeah," Tyler said, growing bolder. "She says the cops are going to impound it, and then maybe someone who deserves it can buy it at auction." That's when we all heard the sirens. 3 patrol cars rolled onto our quiet street, lights flashing, engines revving far louder than necessary for a call like this. Patricia came striding out of her house, phone in hand, looking far too pleased with herself. "Officers," she called out, waving dramatically as the first unit pulled up. "That's him, right there. That's the thief. The moment the first officer stepped out, I recognized him. Martinez. Right behind him were Davidson, Thompson, and the rookie Patel. The second Martinez saw me, his expression shifted confusion, then disbelief. "Chief Morrison," he said slowly, eyes wide. "Morning, Martinez." I replied calmly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Patricia stopped in her tracks. "Chief? What do you mean, Chief?" Davidson stepped forward, clearly trying to keep a straight face. "Ma'am, this is Chief Morrison. He's our boss, the chief of police for the city." All the color drained from Patricia's face. Tyler, now several feet away from the car, suddenly became very focused on his phone. Richard appeared seconds later, standing behind Patricia, looking like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. "But the car," Patricia stammered. "The registration, it doesn't match." I looked it up. "The car belonged to my father," I explained. "He passed away 6 months ago. I inherited it, but I haven't finalized the title transfer yet. I can provide a copy of the will and his death certificate, if needed." I didn't know. Patricia's hands were visibly trembling. "Martinez," I said, turning to him, "I'd like you to file a report. Ms. Dalton placed a 911 call claiming a stolen vehicle. That's a false report. She's also been harassing me for the past 3 weeks because I refused to let her son drive my personal vehicle." "Yes, sir," Martinez replied, already pulling out his notepad. "Wait," Patricia blurted out. "I didn't realize. It was a misunderstanding. You stated you checked the registration and called in a theft." I said, evenly, "That's not a misunderstanding. That's a knowingly false report to emergency services." Thompson, who had quietly turned on his body cam, now shifted his attention to Tyler. "Young man," he said, "were you involved in any of this?" Trying to act tough in front of his friends, Tyler made the fatal mistake of opening his mouth. "Yeah, so what?" he snapped. "He's been a jerk since the day he moved in. Thinks he's better than everyone." "Tyler, that's enough." Richard finally spoke up, his voice low and strained. But Tyler wasn't done. "My mom runs this whole neighborhood," he said, chest puffed out. "She could buy and sell you. When my dad hears about this, you're going to be sorry. We'll sue the whole department." Rookie Patel glanced sideways, stunned. Rookie Patel looked over at me, eyes wide. I gave him a slight nod, "Keep recording." Within the hour, most of the neighborhood had gathered on the sidewalks, drawn by the flashing lights and the commotion. Patricia was cited on the spot for filing a false police report and misuse of emergency services. Tyler was given a formal warning for trespassing and harassment. The entire incident, every word, every outburst, was recorded on multiple body cameras. "This is absurd," Patricia shouted as Martinez handed her citation. "I'm on the HOA board. I'm the one keeping this neighborhood safe." I looked at her calmly. "Ma'am, you used the police as a weapon because your son wanted to drive a car that didn't belong to him. You tied up officers who could have been responding to real emergencies. That's not keeping anyone safe." For the first time, Richard spoke with some urgency. "Patricia, we need to leave. Now." He turned to me, his voice low and sincere. "Chief Morrison, I'm truly sorry. This should never have happened." As they walked off, I could hear Patricia whispering angrily to him. Something about calling their lawyer, suing for defamation, claiming I'd regret this. Tyler trailed behind them, no longer cocky, just quiet and embarrassed. As the last patrol car pulled away, Janet, my next-door neighbor, appeared beside me. "Well, that was something," she said, shaking her head. "And here, I thought we were in for a quiet Saturday." "I certainly wasn't planning on a street circus," I replied. "Oh, you're not done yet," Janet said with a wry smile. "Patricia's already scheduled an emergency HOA meeting for tomorrow night. My guess? She won't be president much longer." She was right. Within days, body camera footage from the incident was requested through public records. Someone, I never found out who, clipped parts of it and posted them online. The video entitled HOA President Calls Cops on City's Chief of Police, went viral fast. Tyler's rant about his parents being able to buy and sell people turned into a meme. At the emergency meeting, Patricia tried to maintain her authority, but it was obvious she'd lost her grip. One by one, neighbors stood up, many for the first time, and shared stories of how she had fined them unfairly, ignored their concerns, or used a position to push her own agenda. What had always been whispered in frustration finally came out in full. When the vote came, it was unanimous. Patricia was removed from the HOA board effective immediately. As she stood to leave, she turned back to face the room. Her voice cracked. "You'll all regret this. I made this neighborhood what it is." "No," Janet said, rising from her seat. "You made this neighborhood a dictatorship. Now we can finally make a community." Patricia stormed out in tears. Richard stayed behind, quietly apologizing to anyone who'd listen. Before leaving, he mentioned that they'd be putting the house up for sale. As for the false police report, that didn't go away either. Patricia was fined $1,000 and sentenced to 50 hours of community service. When she showed up to court, Judge Hendricks, someone I'd known for years, wasn't exactly sympathetic. "Mrs. Dalton," he said, peering over his glasses, "you admitted to checking the vehicle registration, noticing a discrepancy, and immediately calling 911 without making any effort to verify your claim. Then, when officers arrived, you insisted the car was stolen. That's not concern. That's reckless and malicious." Her attorney tried to push for a dismissal, but the body cam footage spoke for itself. When the judge finalized the penalty, $8,000, including fines and court costs, she let out an audible gasp. "And consider yourself lucky I'm not adding jail time," Judge Hendricks added. "Wasting police resources is not a joke." She left the courtroom with her head down, a shell of the person who once barked orders around the neighborhood. In the end, it wasn't a badge or a title that brought her down. It was her own entitlement and her son's arrogance. "All I ever wanted was a quiet home and a safe place to park the car my father and I had built together. Turns out, all it took to get that peace was standing my ground and letting the truth speak for itself."